Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Fox TV show. Today, we are diving into the worldwide quest for innovation and the rise of digital identity. Digital identity is perhaps the single most valuable assets individuals possess nowadays. So data management, data collection, data security have become a high priority. And yes, there is much at stake for governments. To discuss this and much more, I will be joined by Ronny Khan, innovation specialist and digital development expert who has been working within a series of companies and government bodies covering digital identities, internet bank authentication, authorization, card security, and telecommunication. Let me introduce you to Ronny. Hi, Ronny. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Bergen in Norway.
Oh, okay. That
Yeah,
sounds good.
yeah, it's a nice place.
Nice place to be. So listen, we are going to talk about innovation and digital identities today. So everyone is talking about innovation, particularly in these challenging times, with COVID and all this madness. Obviously, the US has been leading the space with the tech giants combining market capitalization that now is actually exceeding that of all companies listed in Europe, which is pretty crazy. But why now it is getting more compulsory to bet on technology for the new economy?
Well, it's basically a question about survival. It's like the trade winds in old days, or the railroad lines, or the roads. It's kind of an essential infrastructure to have and to use if you're going to have trade and prosperity. So it's not a kind of a separate thing. It's a thing that you need to do any kind of business these days.
It's an
And
imperative, basically.
yes, it's a commodity, or whatever you want to call it, and it has become more extreme due to COVID-19. But these things were developing long before COVID-19, but in a much slower pace than what we're seeing today.
Okay, listen, obviously the US has been the gold standard, but what about the other countries? For example, Europe, the UK, and also Asian country?
So I think the Asian countries are very promising. They have allocated a huge resource for research and development. And they're also very active in setting the international standards, which will dominate the global market. As far as the UK, but even more so in Europe, I think they have been soundly asleep for at least 10 years. So they have been losing ground for the last decade. And that's why we today are calling this a digital crisis, because it's like somebody's sleeping too long and things have turned much worse than they could have been.
I think, the interesting things is the statement that you made in few of your presentation, which is that the Europe Digital Emergency, which has become crucial and necessary for the economy and all the industry. Do you maybe want to expand a little bit on that and explain what do you mean with the digital emergency?
Yes. So first of all, this is not a term I invented. It was launched by the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt. And it described what he saw in a K-shaped recovery we had during COVID-19, where we had a lot of industries that went a little bit down and then accelerated up again. And we have other industries that continued in a downward spiral or stayed at the bottom of things. And when you saw the composition of these industries, you found that the traditional industries of Europe were sort of in the wrong part of the K, while the digital technologies and digital companies of Asia and the US were quickly recovering and even gaining ground during these COVID epidemics. So what's the emergency? Well, the emergency is that if you're going to have funding for doing all kind of nice things, like social benefits, like the green recovery or shift, you need to, that money has to come from somewhere. And as the traditional industries in Europe suffer, both due to a lack of infrastructure and other things, you're put in a position where you have this immediate emergency. So that emergency would have arisen eventually anyway, because this wasn't caused by COVID. It was just accelerated by COVID. So we really need to do something now if we're going to avoid going into this spiral where the only way to compete is lowering wages and lowering standards on the environment and these kind of things. So that's why it's an emergency. It's the funding of all the nice things we need to do, and that has to come from the digital.
Well, I think the European Union is kind of getting quite active, particularly in the area of digital identities. I mean, talking about the digital identity initiative, why is so important for a EU citizen to make it so prominent in the president political agenda?
So let's take this from two angles. First of all, for EU as an entity, it's highly important because this has to do with the single digital market, or the single market, if you will. Because in 10 years, there won't be a single market unless it's digital. So that's kind of the heart and soul of the European Union, having a single market. No single market, no European Union. So,
Yeah.
so that's important for the EU for that reason. For the citizens, this is all about capturing the benefits of having this open market. So being able to transact with entities in other countries, where you can get better insurance in some other country than you can do in your home country, where it is easy to deposit money in another country, or to buy a property in another country to retire to. So basically, you should do all of these things without ever leaving your armchair.
And also, what is in for businesses?
For businesses, this is the benefit of scale. So today, businesses in a lot of the European countries are limited to doing business in their own country for services. That doesn't apply for goods. Goods are still going across the borders. But as we know, goods are a decreasing part of the trade. Services are really where the new economy is. So unless you're able in a very small country like mine to actually do business in Germany and France and all of the bigger states, you don't get the benefit of scale. And if without the benefits of the scale, you will have a cost base that is not defendable going forward. So this is, for businesses, this is essential to be able to actually scale up for a European market and get the volume that makes it possible for them to compete on a global area.
Okay, you mentioned about scalability, you mentioned about countries, and at this point I would like to bring in also the UK, because, you know, considering with what is happening with Brexit, definitely is going to be even more important also for them to make sure they have got everything in place to better trade. So this is where the digital identity comes, and has also been described by the UK government as one of the most exciting opportunities for growth and security in the UK economy. Do you see the UK replicating the EU model or something different?
I think it's going to be mostly the same. So EU has been a member of the EU for several years, and also been a great contributor to a lot of the work that's been going on in the EU. So, but there are some kind of country-specific things that will make UK a little bit different from some of the other countries. That's not due to Brexit. You find the same thing in Germany. Germany is extremely privacy sensitive, so they might opt for a privacy that far exceeds what the other countries are doing. But yes, it will be mostly the same. But what will happen after Brexit is that probably UK will not be recognized. So me as a Norwegian, I can use my digital identity in Spain to do something.
Yeah.
For UK won't be able to do that unless they are able to make a deal on these kind of things.
Yeah. And they will obviously have to come up with something which will be their own. So there is a big task for the UK government as well. Now, can you expand on how a secure European e-identity could help the EU rebalance the power game on the control of data between online platform gatekeepers and user citizens?
Yes, I think the most important thing is having an asset. And it's not without a reason that I'm seeing that the big companies from California are spending an incredible amount of money trying to establish their own identity platform. And that's because identity, or digital validation, as I like to call it, because it's proving more than who you are, it also proves other things about you, is the kind of the gate into a bigger world. that logo by Google, Facebook, or Apple exists for a reason. And that's because it's tying into the other services you can offer. So if you lose that also, like we have with the rest of the platforms, you will lose everything. And you can, of course, you can sit on the side and make loud noises about rules and regulations, but that's being a king without a country. So you need to have some assets on the ground to be able to do something, to do some efficient regulation in these areas.
I mean, you mentioned regulation, and I mean, this is something very important. What are the links and synergies between the plan, secure European e-identity, and the legal identity normally established by governments?
Well, they're interconnected. So the legal identity from the government will be what we call a root of trust. So, but today, digital identities is like a crazy house or a funny farm. It's like, yeah, it is. It's like if you kind of translate what's happening there into a card business, it would be that every issuer made a card they wanted, some with magstripe, some without magstripe, some with chip, some without chip, some with pin, some with some other strange way of getting money out of them. That's the reality of electronic identities today. The French electronic identity is completely different from the Belgian, and the Belgian doesn't work with the German. Same in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. So it can't be that way if we want to have a single market. So yes, the nation states will remain the roots of trust, but as they are mandated today to issue passports that behave in a specific way, that will also be the case for electronic identities. They might either do them themselves, or it might be some kind of public-private cooperation, like we see in other areas.
Yeah, talking about that, I mean, we talk about the government responsibility and task, but also what's the role of the private sector in the future in the future secure European identity? I mean, is this technology being produced by European companies? Are there provision to promote innovation in the European tech scenes? How do you think the private sector can actually help to fast track and implement, the digitalization in the identity space?
So this is like a kind of an inverse pyramid. So in the bottom you have basically people digging out sand, producing silicon, which becomes chips. Low value. As you go up the value chain here, you hit the final layer, which is the services. This is the same as Netflix, the Amazons, or these things that produce whatever you want to have. So this is the area where European businesses need to focus, not on the commodities that everybody else makes, but on offering the services on top of basic hardware, really. But that's only one part of the business side here, because you can do business by catering for identity and verification, but there's a huge opportunity also to be the first movers or users of this, the one that are able to actually integrate this into your production processes, your e-commerce, whatever. And I think that's a far more important economic aspect than actually performing in this space, because there's a limited room there. But it's like there's not a lot of money producing power, right? But everybody uses power, and those who uses power in a good way, they're able to produce their goods in a good way. So it is basically the same for digitalization and digital identities. To be able to utilize this opportunity to do whatever business you normally do, that's the main thing to get out of this.
And definitely there is a skill set, there is knowledge within the European Union to leverage on that and actually create something different, and kind of go away from this conception that the US is the only one that is actually bringing real technology in our world.
So Europe is fantastic in terms of developing technology. But we kind of lose what can I call you, the startup mentality or business mentality. So if you look at some of the microprocessors you have in every phone, the phone you have, the phone I have, the phone everybody has, that was originally made by a British company, ARM. So what happened to ARM? Well, it went to the States, sold to a company there, and then to Japan, and back to the States. So we are good at doing innovations, but we are not that good at actually capturing the value of innovation. So that's kind of a different team, but that's also going to be challenging going forward to ensure that that happens.
I think that's a really good point. Now, Digital Europe is one of the 5 objectives of the upcoming Portuguese presidency, showing the EU's commitment to innovation. Beyond the digital identity, what other strategies and policies should be added to ensure Digital Europe can in fact blossom in the coming years?
So we have some other initiatives like European cloud, European microprocessors, etc. I don't really believe in those because they are commodities. But what is important is that we need to have an infrastructure in place so that when we build these fantastic new services, everybody's able to use them. It's not helpful if 1/3 of Europe is sitting somewhere where they don't have only low connection bandwidths and are not able to do these kind of things. The second part is skill set. So on average, Europe is in a fantastic position compared to the US. Much better skill sets in digital than the US. But if you compare it to the Asian countries, that's another story. They are much better at us than educating people and also doing research and development in this area. So that's the kind of the 3 pillars. We need to build the infrastructure. So we have this kind of highway, if you want to call it that, for transporting data. We need to ensure that we have the people and the people skills to do that. And we need to build the services on top of all of that, using the people, using the infrastructure to produce something useful. If we build only the infrastructure and it's only used to watching Netflix, well, that's not going to bring a lot of benefit really to the economy.
Okay, you did mention about the connection, which is actually lacking in some parts of areas of Europe. What do you see as being the challenges of implementing this project, considering obviously there is a need to digitalize services both at the public and the private sector? I mean, one could be the connection, obviously.
Yes, well, it's always challenging to do these kind of things because you have this discussions. Well, in this village, it only lives 100 people, and probably in 10 years, it's going to be half of that because it's a pattern. People are moving away for these small villages. How much money are you going to use to build fiber connections or 6G connections to that village? And ultimately, this is a political question that needs to be addressed in the European Parliament and by the Commission. But I think it would be smart to try to de-urbanize Europe and also ensure that small remote places have the infrastructure in place. We wouldn't dream of not building roads to them. So of course we should build infrastructure for data to them. But this is a political question. This is basically who you vote to Parliament is going to decide this.
Finally, talking about emerging markets, where do digital identities opportunities lie?
So basically everywhere. So what we have today is that we have the South Asian economies. They are in a position where they have the people, they have the resources, and they have the will to implement this, and they can learn a lot about our mistakes and avoid doing the same mistakes. So they're obviously going to do this, and as I said earlier, they're also working very hard at making the rules for international standards, which we in Europe kind of have left somehow in favor of our own internal standardization. So they're the obvious candidate, and that's Korea, China, partially Japan, but at least Korea and China. When it comes to Africa, it's interesting. So if Africa is kind of this bimodal country, we have places in Africa that are more or less like the West and can follow the same pattern as we do. But we also have rural areas that are less developed. In these areas, there's a huge opportunity, but they kind of need to find their own way. So when we introduced this kind of countermeasures against terror financing, a lot of remote areas in Africa suffered because how should they do normal know your customer processes? And they spent a lot of time figuring that one out. So the same thing applies here. They have to define a model that works for them and implement that. And when you look at that, it's not what they did in the know your customer area was actually done in the United States until 9/11. Basically, there were some outstanding members of a community could vote for identity. That was good enough to get a driver license in many states in the US. And I think that's the kind of the model Africa needs to do now. Start simple and then build a base upon that. But it's a huge opportunity for Africa, and I think it's a huge opportunity for all of us, because we really need to do something about the impoverished regions of Africa if this planet is going to survive.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, is there any project that you're currently work on that you would like maybe to share some insight or bring it to the conversation?
So what I'm looking at the moment is the implementation of the new European electronic identity, and that's going to be very interesting because the key stakeholder has set a very strict pace. Things are going to happen very soon, and I'm working in a system that is not used to doing things in that way. So if you take your normal bureaucracy, they're used to kind of sending out something for everybody to opinionate on, and then process that for half a year, and then do something else. And so everything takes several years. That's not going to happen here. So there's going to be an interesting period to get this into something that is usable and useful. So that's kind of a thing I would invite everybody to engage in and ensure that we have a good solution going forward.
Good. I think one of the points that obviously are going to be relevant, and also they are kind of a challenge, is really education, because when it comes to technology, it's not that everybody, even within the government, they actually understand how the new technology works, and that is kind of complicated from the top and decision making, and then also for the people, they actually have to adopt this new technology. How do you see, first of all, the government to overcome this barrier, this technology barrier, and then to incentivize more people to make this step and embrace technology more in a wider and complete way?
So starting off, just saying that we are in a much better position than the US when it comes to this. We have a much better coverage in the population of education and understanding of this of technology. But I think the first thing we need to realize is that you can't avoid it. It's like you can go to a party today and you can say to people, well, I don't understand these computer things, and you can laugh and everybody's happy. You wouldn't dream of doing the same thing and going to that party and saying, well, I can't read. Everybody would be shocked, right? So
Yeah.
that is basically the mindset we need to have. So you need to at least have a working knowledge on technology. That's as essential as reading. And of course, the government can help you with programs and outreach programs and open universities and these kind of things. But it has to become socially unacceptable to say that I don't understand this. That you can't have it that way.
I think people has to be also more curious about it, and not always think, because the world is evolving, and even your curiosity can bring you far. And then obviously the government has got the need to introduce curriculum and make the education more mainstream, but the curiosity in people in understanding the world is changing, and you have to catch up, is also a very important point.
Yes, and of course my business need to be a little more humble, right? Because we kind of act and behave like the high priests. Well, this is really secret. You're too stupid to understand this, right? So we can't go on doing that. We have to be more open and willing to share what we're doing. So some of us are, most of us, I hope, but there are still kind of an aspect of the high priest in the temple that has the secrets that nobody else is supposed to know. And that has to go away also.
But also, people has to realize it's not just about being techie, it's about also protecting ourselves, because as data is becoming a really important asset, the most valuable that people possess. They really have to make sure they are protecting the assets, which is data. And it's difficult to do if you don't know how to do it and you don't want to understand. So
but that's basically what is trying to do now by introducing a pan-European way of doing things. If you are able to do that, you're in a position to regulate what kind of flows through the pipeline and to who. And then you can make guidelines on how data should be protected, what kind of right you have to see what data is stored about you, your right to share the data to whoever you want, and to have it to being used to whatever you want. So the strange thing is that when we do this, we get this kind of outcry. So people are immediately seeing the surveillance state. Well, so the government is going to decide everything and they're going to take my data and they're going to use it for some sinister purpose. Well, it's not reality. So what we have today is that every day we give a lot of data to some Silicon Valley-based companies who do what they want with the data. They might protect it, might not protect it. And we do that happily every day. We click on yes, I accept everything.
Exactly. So, we don't even
it's a paradox, right?
A paradox indeed. Listen, I'm looking forward to see what is going to happen with the Europe program initiatives and what you are working on. That sounds really interesting. Ronny, thank you so much to being on our program, and I look forward to have you back again when we start to see things progressing.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is everything from today, and I hope that you enjoyed the interview, and please follow us on social media and also to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I will see you next time.